The Blessed Pope John Paul II had spoken of a new springtime of Christian life, which will occur in the third millennium, in which we are now, if we Christians become docile, or submit ourselves to the action of the Holy Spirit. To help us, it is necessary that we deal with an aspect of Philippine life, which urgently needs change and renewal according to the gospel, the way we conduct politics in our country. Politics is the art of government and public service. But sadly, in the Philippines, it has degenerated into an arena where the interests of the powerful and rich few are pitted against those of the weak and poor many. It interferes with the administration of justice and the equal application of the law, heavily tilted on the side of the politically connected. Political debts are paid with appointments to high offices of those to whom elected officials are indebted. The constitutional principles of separation of powers, and of checks and balances among the three departments of government, are on the one hand abused, to create deadlock for political mileage, and on the other hand, conveniently set aside on occasion for reciprocal advantage. When it comes to elections, the electoral process has been systematically subverted, with increasingly sophisticated methods of tilting the playing field or committing fraud. People have become so distrustful or cynical of government, of Congress, and of the electoral process itself, that often they lose sight of the relevance of their vote to their life or future, and sell it for momentary financial gain. What we just cited about politics in our country does not, by any means, exhaust all we can say about it. But in order to be able to do something constructive with it, by way of the renewal and conversion we seek, we need to have a closer look at our political culture. Let us begin with a typical politician's concept of public office. Many a politician looks at it as a means of enrichment, and a source of influence and power for self and family enlargement. It hence easily becomes considered and actually treated as some sort of private property to be passed on from one generation to another, the perpetuation of power that is at the base of so-called political dynasties. In this manner, no distinction is made between public funds and private money. What accounts for this sad state of things? What kind of political system have we created where base power and greed, not principles of self-sacrificing service, are too often the operative norms of conduct of public officials? For some of the answers, it would be good to scrutinize one aspect of our politics, the election process, if only for the fact that it is at election time, that the worst flaws of our political system and culture glaringly show themselves in their most degrading forms. The pre-election day activities. In the campaign period, the first focus of attention is on getting oneself chosen as the candidate of a party, and he looks for a party that can help him fulfill his ambitions, without regard to ideology and platform. Thus, it is commonplace to see or hear of disappointed candidates, switching party affiliations or founding their own parties. Prospective candidates make sure they get plenty of public exposure. To have this, they cultivate media people diligently and resort to bribing journalists to make sure they land in the news. At this stage, they already incur huge expenses. In turn, those already in government use public funds and government facilities to finance public service messages that trumpet their accomplishments. When convention time comes, delegates are wined, dined, and womened in order to win their votes. Here, election spending gets even more heavy. If candidates spend enormous amounts of money freely in the election campaign period, everybody knows they do so in the certainty that they will be able to get back every single item of expense and more when they assume office. The campaign period turns the Philippine scene into a mad circus, a vast entertainment plaza. Candidates will, during this period, do whatever their audience bids them to do. They will dance, clown, kickbox, sing, use gutter language, anything to sell themselves and heighten name recall, except educate the electorate on issues. People take advantage of the campaign period to ask donations for every conceivable project from candidates, who are pressured to give under pain of losing valuable votes. This in turn forces candidates to solicit or accept contributions from vested interests, who expect a return after the elections. Dirty tricks, black propaganda, mudslinging, anything to weaken or destroy the opposition are resorted to. In short, the laws of ordinary morality are suspended during the campaign period. Election day activities. Winning at any cost and by any means has become the paramount principle governing candidates and parties in their election bid. This translates, on election day itself, into vote buying, the use of flying voters, the intimidation of voters for the opposition, violence, even murder. The monitoring by citizens groups of election day activities thus becomes a necessity, even if at times highly hazardous. Even with electronic election, confusion is the order of the day. And it has to be with proclamation of winners. Every loser cries foul, declares himself cheated, and election results are not accepted. The Commission on Elections takes its own sweet time deciding on election protests so that when initial verdicts are finally overturned, cheating anomalies corrected, those belatedly declared winners are barely able to assume their seats before the new election takes place. What follows is the whole tissue of evils in our way of conducting politics. Thus, election winners once in, use their office for gain and the shoring up of their power, paying political debts, recouping election expenses, making fat profits for themselves. The consequences of corruption bring us to our nation's fiscal problems, where at least 40% of the annual budget is lost annually to corruption, exacerbated by 30% of our annual budget being automatically allocated to foreign debt repayment. This means that for every peso, only 30 centavos technically go to public services, leading to minuscule funds going to public services to the detriment of the people. It becomes a vicious cycle. All these account for widespread poverty in our country. As of the first quarter of 2013, the SWS survey placed the number of poor Filipinos at 10.6 million families, translating to some 53 million Filipinos. Let us compare ourselves with our neighboring countries in terms of per capita income. Based on the 2011 data from the World Bank, the Philippines' per capita income was at $2,370, ranking fourth among the ASEAN 5 nations, beating only Vietnam. Our per capita income is equal to only 24% or a quarter of Malaysia's, 48% of or just one half of Thailand's, and 68% or two-thirds of Indonesia's. Compared to the industrialized economies of Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea, and Taiwan, ours is only 8% or less than one-tenth of their average per capita income of $30,805. The net worth of the top 20 Filipino families is $15.6 billion, while 70% of Filipino families struggle to survive on 86 pesos or less per day. The Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines, thus, gave these remarks on our kind of politics. Philippine politics, the way it is practiced, has been most hurtful of us as a people. It is possibly the biggest bane in our life as a nation, and the most pernicious obstacle to our achieving of full human development. If we are what we are today, a country with a very great number of poor and powerless people, one reason is the way we have allowed politics to be debased and prostituted to the low level it is in now. Our faith in God has played a key role in major events of our history. Yet politics, as a whole, has been strangely and largely impervious, or indifferent to the gospel. Our political culture denies, to our shame, our proud claim to the name Christian. What then, according to our church, are we called to do as demanded by our faith? We must engage ourselves totally against the forces that stand in the way of reform and systemic change. We must encourage and support one another, in what should be a common and concerted striving, to create a less hurtful and more humane political order. The urgent need is for us, as Christians and as church, to evangelize politics, to become involved in politics in the way of the gospel. Hence, the bishop's call to all Christian Catholics: we invite all of you, our brothers and sisters in the Lord, to join us in a common resolve to clean up, and to renew what we have seen is one of the most harmful aspects of our national life, today's kind of politics. But if we, the laity, are to respond affirmatively to this call and invitation of our faith, how do we go about changing the way politics is done in our country so that, instead of being a stumbling block, it positively contributes to integral development, including the spiritual growth of our people? How do we renew politics, so that it becomes a channel for our people's well-being, and growth in the life of grace? And how do we ensure that the truths about faith and politics do not remain unattainable ideals but become reality?